bitch.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to list who I think are the most strongest witches in the Vampire Diary universe, in order. And my disclaimer would be, you should definitely see all three shows so that the lore and their feats make more sense, but if not, I'll try my best to explain them. But other than that, let's get started. At number 5 is Freya Michelson. Freya is the firstborn child of Michael and Esther, and if you know anything about the Michelson family bloodline, you know that the firstborn witch receives devastating magic when born. And we first see this when Freya, during a flashback, was around a campfire. She lost control of her emotions, which then in turn made her magic spiral out of control, causing the weather to go wild and crows all around her started to die. But that scene didn't come until later in the show. I'll take us back to her first appearance, where we get a glimpse of just how powerful she is. So the first time we see Freya is when she's trapped in a witch asylum, and she revealed herself to her sister Rebecca, who was also trapped. And it just so happened that Rebecca was planning to escape, but sadly the wardens of the asylum caught her, and she had no powers to defend herself. But luckily Freya comes in and saves her. She telekinetically threw 3 people against the wall, and killed a girl just by making her bleed out. We then see her do what we've only seen one other witch do, and that's instantly heal a wound just by focusing on it. And after Rebecca and Freya leave the asylum, Freya breaks the curse on the asylum that trapped all the witches inside. She then proceeded to blow the gates off its hinges, and after her first appearance, it was impressive feats after impressive feats, like when she was able to resurrect her brother Finn by keeping his soul in a pendant. She quickly healed his body that was burned to death, then she just put his soul back in it. We've also seen, with a flick of a wrist, she's able to share her memories with anyone. But now would be a good time to tell you how Freya is able to do the impossible, because yes, while she is a Michelson firstborn, we do learn that she obtained a massive amount of power because of her aunt Dahlia. We were shown in an attempt to gain more power, Dahlia created a new form of connective magic, which she then linked herself with Freya, boosting both of their powers. But on top of that, Dahlia put herself and Freya under a slumber spell, and this spell put them to sleep for a century. And while they were asleep, their magic would continue to grow and grow, so when they're allowed to be awake for a year, they can showcase their enormous amount of power, which I'm going to list now for Freya, starting with her turning her mother into a flock of birds, then killing them instantly. She accelerated the metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly. She was able to locate her niece Hope, even though it was said it would take 100 witches to do so, and she was able to break free from cursed shackles that stopped witches from using their powers. Then later on in that season, we see her disrupt one of Dahlia's spells that was killing her family. And to protect her sister Rebecca again, she astral projected to her and snapped every vampire's neck in that room. And finally again, we see her do something we've only seen one other witch do, and that's teleport themselves to different locations. But I am going to tell you why she's at number 5, and that's because of 2 reasons. One being, when Dahlia and Freya became unlinked, Freya lost all her access to the massive amount of power created while under the slumber spell. So from then on, we saw her having to channel a lot of people and objects. And reason number 2 being, her feats do fall in comparison to everybody else on this list, like number 4, who is... So at number 4 we have Esther Michelson, aka the original witch. Esther was one of the greatest practitioners of using dark magic, and her most powerful and talked about feat is her creation of the original vampires and essentially every other vampire that came after them. And this feat was her biggest because this was the second instance where something was created that goes against nature, which is what lives must die. And this creation needed an enormous amount of power, which Esther was able to accumulate by using dark magic and channeling multiple sources like the sun and oak tree for power and immortality. So yes, Esther's creation of the original vampires was her biggest effect on the world, but not her last. Like how she created moonlight rings by combining many different spells into one. This would allow werewolves to control their transformation, thus sparing them from turning every full moon, which is a painful process. And in addition to controlling their transformations, while wearing the rings, wolves can access their full powers of their wolf form while in human form. Also, if we're on the topic of ring creation, I need to bring up how Esther also created daylight rings. You know, the only reason why vampires can walk in the sun? Yeah, we have Esther to thank for that. Truly, Esther's ability to create and modify spells is something very impressive. But moving on, during a period of time, Esther was a spirit on the other side. We see she still possessed a great amount of power. Using her talisman as a conduit, she gave a dead Vicky a foothold into the world of the living. Esther was also able to wedge open a doorway between planes that let ghosts with unfinished business pass through. With some time after her death, Esther managed to resurrect herself, and resurrections in the Vampire Diaries are not an easy thing to do. But not only that, she was able to create a new enhanced original vampire that was in every aspect stronger than the original vampires. And lastly, then I'll be done. Esther, while consecrated in New Orleans, was able to become the leader of the ancestral witches. She was then able to bend the ancestral plane, gaining total control over it and the New Orleans witches. And finally, with a wave of her hand, she was able to cause minor earth shakes. So you see, Esther is really powerful, but I do think there's someone above her who's really close to home. So at number 3 we have Dahlia. And like her sister Esther, Dahlia is one of the most powerful users of dark magic, but we soon learn that she exceeds her sister in the practice of dark magic. Also like her niece Freya, she's a firstborn Michelson, meaning she also received devastating powers. And we first get a glimpse of her magic when she casted a fertility spell on her sister that allowed her to birth a number of children. Then we were shown, like her sister Esther, she has a gift for creating and modifying spells, like when she created a new brand of connective magic. She linked herself with Freya, which boosted both of their powers. And we see the first thing she does with her newfound powers is kill everyone in a nearby village. But she didn't stop there. In another attempt to gain more power, she created the slumber spell, which I explained what it was in Freya's section, so I can skip past that explanation. Dahlia was also responsible for creating Freya's talisman that helped focus her magic. And through a killing spell she created, it allowed her to invade people's minds and speak through them. But this is just a half of it. We see her do something we've never seen someone do in the TVD universe. Dahlia was powerful enough to grant a group of humans a fraction of her magic. And not only that, with a wave of her hand, she was able to desiccate 2 original vampires. And we were shown that it actually takes a lot to desiccate an original vampire. Then we see her teleport twice, which we've only seen one other witch do. Now apart from all that, you'd notice Dahlia's lack of need for spells, like how she destroyed an enchanted blade that was meant to kill her, and instantly healed Josephine's hands that was cursed for decades. She did all that without a spell. And finally, we see her destroy the white oak stake that was indestructible, showing us one last time just how powerful she is. Now on to the next witch. Now we have the Hollow, and if you ever watched the originals, you know how powerful she is. She's the most powerfulest witch to be on the originals, and I'll always stick by that. First off, she has an immortal soul, meaning even when she dies, her soul will stay on a physical plane, and that allows her to possess anyone of her liking. And not only that, after possessing someone, she can retain her magical abilities also while using the host abilities as well. Next, she was able to put down an upgraded original vampire by turning her blood to acid and telekinetically screaming him away. And in a previous encounter, she desiccated him quite easily. We were also shown that the Hollow is very proficient in illusion magic. She was shown to be able to trick even the most strongest of creatures. And lastly, she created her own style of magic that was so powerful, she was able to resurrect people like it was nothing. And we find out she created the entire werewolf race by channeling her own death. Now we're coming down to the final 2 witches. So now we're on to Bonnie Bennett, and sadly for Bonnie, she started practicing witchcraft really late, but that didn't stop her from becoming a very powerful witch. Bonnie's first experiences with magic was divination, intuition, and premonitions. It started when she would touch objects and people and get certain feelings and vibes off them. Like with Stefan, she sensed death when they touched. Then she just seemingly started to know where things were, like Elena's serving spoons and candles in her kitchen. Her intuition got so strong, she started focusing on the numbers 8, 14, and 22. And it turns out her power of premonition had helped her predict the death of her coach at her school. Next, with some training, she starts to get control of telekinesis and pyrokinesis, like when she levitated pillow feathers or when she lit multiple candles or almost set a car on fire. And with some practice, she learned how to induce aneurysms like her grams. And being a Bennett witch, her powers were only going to grow and grow. And grow they did. Fun fact, did you know that Bonnie has used many different forms of magic than any other witch? But after finally mastering her powers, Bonnie has a lot of impressive feats, like when she used expression. This power allowed her to do things she couldn't do while using traditional magic, like resurrections, rapid healing, taking down an original vampire, as well as shaking the balance between life and death. She could also cast locator spells by simply throwing the target's belonging in a fire. Now moving on from expression, when Damon's soul was trapped in a phoenix stone, Bonnie alone got him out when we saw it took 3 heretics to do the same thing. And her biggest feat to date is her destroying the Hell Dimension. She first was able to stop the Hellfire by herself that spanned for 7 miles. She then summoned her ancestors, and with their help, they pushed back all the Hellfire, destroying the dimension. And lastly, Bonnie is the only known witch/psychic hybrid. Bonnie, with her psychic power, created a dimension that held her dead boyfriend's soul. She also went toe-to-toe with the devil for Damon's soul, and I'd say she put up a good fight against him. Now and finally, we're coming to the winner witch. So at number 0, we have Katsia, because if you haven't noticed, my numbers are off. But anyways, Katsia to me is arguably the strongest witch in the TVD universe. She pioneered an incredible feat that no one else has done. She created the immortality spell that was able to create a true immortal that totally went against nature. But luckily for nature, Katsia had created a cure for immortality because without it, there would be no loophole to stop the immortals. Next, Katsia also created the other side, and it was a dimension that held every single dead supernatural soul, and it was there for more than 2,000 years. And when the veil was down, Katsia took it upon herself to resurrect herself. Plus, her blood alone was a massive source of power. It's said to equal to that of a celestial event. And while alive, she was shown to have an impressive skill for manipulating dreams. She also created a sunlight boundary spell. And finally, one big thing that's impressive and why I give Katsia the top spot is because Katsia, while doing all these incredible things, was using the weakest form of magic. And her using traditional magic, she honestly shouldn't have been able to do those things, but she did. So that's my list who I think are the most strongest witches in the TVD universe in order. To give my end thoughts, I basically want to know, in your opinion, who's the strongest witches in the TVD universe in order, and why do you think that? Tell me in the comments down below.